to say a huge welcome to everybody to this Agents Together webinar. It is Mental Health Awareness Week this week, and whilst we absolutely think that it shouldn't just have 1 week, it's 52 weeks a year, we do recognise that these weeks can bring an important spotlight onto the conversation and give a great opportunity for people to discuss some of the topics in more detail and raise awareness. This year's theme is around anxiety, and I recently attended the Women in Estate Agency conference, and there I heard Amy speak about, very candidly might I say, about anxiety and some of the techniques she uses to overcome it. So she just had to be a guest today, and she'll share loads. And then Rob, if any of you don't follow Rob online, please go and follow him. He's got podcasts, he does loads and loads for local charity, and he is a total mental health advocate, and I cannot think of us being joined by anyone better. And of course, you've got me, Sarah Edmundson, and our absolutely wonderful Sam Offley, who is the relationship manager at Agents Together. So we're going to get stuck in, I think. But hi, Rob. Hi, Amy.
Hiya.
Hello. Thank you so much for joining us. So basically, without further ado, I think it's really important, first of all, for me to say this. I read a statistic in a recent report that was done by the Mental Health Foundation, and they said that 1 in 5 of us suffers from anxiety in the last 2 weeks. Like, it's a lot. Like, but then the question remains: what is anxiety? Because I know that some people dismiss it a little bit and think, well, come on, stiff upper lip type society that we've been brought up in the UK, and they think actually, why they almost think it's like a vulnerability that's not needed or soft almost. So, can you share with us first and foremost, what does anxiety look and feel like? I think is the first question, and how does it present itself? I don't know who wants to go first. I'm going to let one of you go.
Go on, Amy.
Okay. So for me, it's probably a little bit more physical, I suppose, although I don't tend to show it. So a lot of people, I actually had a panic attack the night before the Women in Agency conference in the restaurant, and nobody knew apart from my partner. I just took myself off. And for me, I get so sweaty palms, probably the first thing. Have that right now. And then I get like a wave of heat, like a hot flush. It's the easiest way to describe it. So I get like this wave of heat going through my body. And then if it's getting worse, I'll start then getting like waves of nausea. I'm going to say it, nervous poos, anxious poos, that happens. So yeah, I think it affects my tummy probably more. So I get nausea quite badly, but I just sort of start panicking, and it's gets into your head. So I start feeling sick, and then I think I'm going to be sick, and then I have to get out of that situation, have to get outside, and it's quite hard to bring me down when I'm in that place. So I don't shake, but I go very hot, very clammy, and just I'm panicking, and I wouldn't say I have breathing attacks, but certainly breathing increase, like faster rate of breathing, and just general panic. I'm kind of like pacing and kind of, in a panic, I think is the easiest way. So that's kind of how it affects me.
And thank you for sharing that, Amy. And so already Megan 18 has just said anxious poos are a real thing. So we're just going to get that out there. I didn't expect to be talking about this so quickly on this webinar.
Sorry.
But we've done it. We're there now. Thank you, Spencer, for saying that the chat is disabled. That is classic me. So if anybody needs to say anything, please go to the Q&A and we'll use that rather than the chat. I don't know how I've managed to do that. I'm going to blame Zoom, but it'll definitely be my fault. apologies. So please use the Q&A, and Callum, I think you have just raised your hand. So if you could please pop whatever question it is that you've got into the Q&A box, then we'll make sure we answer that. Thank you, Spencer. Rob, talk to me. What does anxiety look and feel like in your experience, either personal or in the work that you do?
So I've done a lot of work on my anxiety over the years, and I'm probably at a different place to maybe what Amy is right now. But mine started when I was actually in my primary school years. And it actually had to do a load of work to get back to why that was happening and why the triggers were happening. And it happened from literally social anxiety amongst assemblies, and me taking myself out to the toilet. And I didn't even know what anxiety was. You wouldn't even know it as a 6-7-year-old kid. So I thought I had issues, and it'd be the same triggers over and over again. And it was a very private thing I did over and over again. The teacher used to have a go at me because they were thinking I was being disruptive. And then that progressed into my teens, even down into going into sort of intimacy with partners, going into my 20s. And it was only really when I started to have to do some really inner work, then I started to work out and actually did this massive exercise back to working out what actually was my major trigger, which then has helped me going forward. And that was literally, as crazy as it sounds, because this is where, you think it's just someone just gets it now, and that can be from traumatic events or lifestyle changes. But mine was purely, I was a naughty boy because I've got ADHD in an assembly, and I was in a music assembly, and I was just pulling faces, and I had a teacher pull me out and say, right, you're going to get on the stage next, and you're going to do the recording in front of everyone, and I'm going to make sure everyone laughs at you. And that was a teacher. I remember that teacher saying to me about it. So I stuck that in my head, and that was everything I progressed through for all my years in social environments, talking openly about it, stuff like that. And that was really interesting when you work back on how you act as an adult from those primary school years.
Yeah, I think triggers are so important. You've got to understand, and the way to help cope with anxiety is the triggers, and understanding that what does trigger you.
I totally agree with that, Amy. And if I may say so, I think this is something we're going to cover a little bit later on. Quite importantly, is actually talking about anxiety, because it's one thing us as individuals knowing what our triggers are and understanding how to cope with and manage our own anxiety. But there's two other things for me that are vitally important. One is being able to, without stigma, share to people that's their behavior or an environment or whatever might be causing a trigger that causes anxiety, and that being okay, and them trying everything they can in the most part to reduce those triggers with you, but also recognizing anything that we may do ourselves that also cause other people to trigger, and I'm guilty of all of that. I'm never going to sit here and say that I'm perfect, far from it. But I think the more I learn about anxiety and how it manifests itself in your day-to-day life, it is that you have to be able to share it without stigma, and hopefully this webinar will help us to do that. So we'll tackle that a bit later on. Thank you, Rob, for sharing that as well. I think that's a really powerful message for everybody, is that sometimes you've got to do the work a little bit and go back and work out the where, the why. Wonderful, Sam. What do you have any experience with anxiety that you would be happy to share, or personal or professional, or knowledge of?
Yes, so I think anxiety affects a lot of us, a lot more than people think. For me and my experiences, it's definitely that tightness in the neck, feel like you're choking. I think everyone does have that fight or flight response when you're going through some sort of panic attack that's scary if you're experiencing it for the first time. I just want to say massive thank you to Amy and Rob, because the stories that you've just shared, I know for the fact that can already support so many mentees that are struggling with this. So two professional people like you sharing your personal experiences has already done loads.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right, Sam. It's about understanding that we're all at some point probably going to experience it, and some of us more than others, and that's okay. It's about how we help support and overcome, isn't it? I mean, I can't really add too much there, but I will share with you very briefly, everybody who's joined us today and anybody who's watching back. Recently, I'll be honest, I was a little bit ignorant to anxiety maybe 2 or 3 years ago, if I'm truthfully honest. I am quite an outgoing, slightly loud, slightly overconfident person at times. But in more recent years, I've had cause for anxiety, particularly around health anxiety. I spent a long time not feeling comfortable in groups because of a health freaking out about health, basically. And then further to that, I've seen the physiological impact that stress and anxiety can have on someone. I recently had literally, and I'm not over exaggerating this, I was waiting for some news, personal news, and for 2 weeks I had crippling headaches. 2 weeks. The day that I got the news, the headaches disappeared, and I thought, the news was positive, by the way, which is nice. And so that's why they disappeared. But I thought that there was something else wrong, and that was that health anxiety. And you don't realize how these things are presenting themselves and what they're actually doing to you. And it can be quite debilitating. So we're all of us, I think, one way or another, whatever part of your life it is, facing anxiety at times. And I think it's really important that we can help each other to recognize the cause, as Rob said, recognize some of the symptoms, and then the most important part, I think, which is what I'm going to ask our wonderful panelists next, is how do we overcome it? It's a huge question. Right, there's no one size fits all answer, but what are some of the techniques that you have all sort of used, maybe good and bad, some that work, some that haven't, we could talk about, recognizing that it's a personal thing, but maybe sharing some techniques will really help the people that have joined us today. Amy?
I go again. I believe that I don't think you can cure anxiety. I think it's part of us, and I'm quite proud of that. It's part of me. It's who I am, and I very much see it as kind of like actually a strength now. So I've kind of flipped my kind of thinking on it, even though it's really annoying when you have a panic attack. Actually, I kind of use that in emotion in other ways. So it's coping techniques are difficult. We work in quite a high pressured environment, so our industry isn't just rocking up to an office working 9 to 5. Estate agents are stressed people, stressed individuals generally, and I think even in the supplier world, I think Rob would agree with me that the supplier world isn't a walk in the park either. So there are different techniques, and I've had situations where I've had to walk out of meetings, etc. So it's similar to being on evaluation in those instances. So I think to run through the techniques quickly that I went through at the women conference, probably the easiest way. So the first one for me is an estate agent that really helped. So I was on an evaluation, or someone's house, which is quite daunting. Most people get that. If you don't get sweaty palms before evaluation, I think that's quite unnormal as a salesperson. So you go in, but I used to then mid-pitch, something would, I don't know, trigger me. I have a fear of being sick, which is actually not that uncommon, but quite weird at the same time. So if I'm in a situation where I start thinking about, oh my God, what if I'm sick? Where do I go? Do I go to the toilet? Do I go outside? My head just spirals. And that will bring on an anxiety attack for me. If I just get the slight wave of nausea, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be sick. So for me, getting outside on a valuation appointment was really important in those situations. And it's really easy to do on evaluation, because you can be literally mid-pitch and be like, do you know what? I'd actually really just like to just quickly have another look outside in the garden, gather my thoughts, because I really want to propose a really strong and suitable marketing strategy for you. And I'd just like to just go and gather my thoughts and think about that strategy that I want to talk to you about before, you know, I run through the detail with you. They think that's brilliant, because you're going outside to actually think. You're not just one of these estate agents that yes, you know the figure before you've gone out, but you're actually that it looks like you're taking time to think about the proposal to them. And it just gets you outside, and then you can either start breathing techniques, or one of the ones that I quite liked was, especially when you're outside, is the 5 things. So something that you can see, something that you can hear, something you can taste, something you can touch, and just listening, especially this time of year, to the birds. If you're outside trying to listen to, okay, I can hear the traffic noise, I can hear the birds singing, I can hear the tractor in the field behind me, because it just starts your brain thinking about something else. It's like brain distraction. So that's always quite good. One thing that doesn't work for me is counting up, because that actually heightens my anxiety as I count up. So if I'm breathing in on 1, out on 2, in on 3, out on 4, that heightens me. So counting down is a really good, and you sort of say to your brain, when I get to 0, I'm going to be cool, I'm going to be all right. And you start at 10 and you just count down to 0, and that calms me a lot more than counting up. So that's one of the ones that I quite like when, again, you get outside. What else? So I've written my notes, obviously. So the breathing techniques, one thing that worked for me, and I remember we got everyone standing up at the conference doing this, didn't we?
If you're watching this, please now
you can stand up and do this.
Instructions from Amy. I'm not going to do it.
But this one is really weird, and my other half listened to a podcast and this was on it, and this is insane. I can't believe how well this works. It's just incredible if you do it properly. So you kind of do a deep breath in, and then when you get to the top of that breath, you hold it, and then you do a quick inhale, and then you very slowly release out. And it's something about releasing I don't know the ins and outs of the science of this, but it releases the CO2 in your body, apparently, or something like that. There's a scientific reason for this. So you do a really deep breath in. Okay, but the deep breath in needs to be slow, and the outhale breath needs to be slow as well. And if you do that a few times, like 3-4 times, you literally, I feel it in my tummy, like the calm. It's bizarre. So that's a really, really good one. Or that definitely works for me. And I think the other one, the only other one that sort of works for me is, again, going back to sort of brain distraction and trying to, this was on another podcast, but trying to retrain your brain to turn the nervousness into excitement, which is really hard. And it's something I'm still working on. But it's the one thing that does help me when I'm flying. So I also am terrified of flying. Again, relates back to my trigger of being feeling sick, because I get travel sick, and as a kid I got really travel sick on planes, and I have a fear of being sick on a plane. It just is awful for me. I can't cope with it at all. So something I have to try and think about on planes is how excited I am to get on the sun lounger on the beach, or how excited I am to get my ski suit on and go skiing. I have to start trying to visualize how excited I am. If I'm coming home, how excited I am to see my dog, how excited I am to get home. I'm a bit sad, get all the washing done. How excited I am to, like, a bit weird like that. Just trying to turn the nervous energy you've got into excitement. So instead of the fear and the nerves, trying to flip that into, what are you excited about in that situation? If you're traveling somewhere, or if you're at evaluation, I'm excited about winning this instruction. I'm excited to talk about why this seller is moving. I'm excited to understand their situation and help them move. So just try and it's a really long process, and I'm still going through it at the moment, but trying to retrain your brain to be excited rather than nervous.
Thank you so much. I mean, I loved all of that, and I've written already a full page of notes myself. So thank you, Amy. But particularly, I think a particularly relevant point for estate agents in their workplace. There's a load of other stuff there. I know anxiety doesn't just happen in the workplace. It happens everywhere. But particularly in that workplace setting, and talking about those valuations, you've mentioned being outside quite a few times. I think a lot of people share that sort of outside thing. And if you're an employer watching this, I think allowing and understanding that your team might need to take a few minutes outside from time to time should be a really something that you really are open to.
I'd encourage it. You know, if someone has a bad phone call, I used to tell my negotiators to go outside and just breathe.
But isn't it the case, Amy, that it doesn't have to be a bad phone call?
Anything.
So actually just encouraging that because outside does work a lot for a lot of people. I think for me, the really big point that you made there about that mindset shift, that can assist in so much, actually having that positivity and that mindset, you know, about the fact that I'm excited to help these people move. I'm excited to actually win this instruction. Actually, you're probably going to come across better on the appointment as well, and therefore potentially have a higher chance of actually winning the business as well. So it kind of all goes full circle, but I accept that it doesn't just happen with a click of the fingers. It does take some work. Just very quickly, I am going to come to you, Rob, but I just want to say, Callum, thank you for your note. Yes, it will be available on demand. This is going to be on our YouTube channel and shared everywhere. And we will also ensure that you get a copy directly to everybody who is on here as well, for you to share with your teams. We absolutely want people to see this. So yes, thank you. And Sophie, thank you for saying that you are the same and you hide your anxiety attacks, usually to the detriment of yourself and others. You know, you're not alone in that. We're taught that anxiety is not to be shared. Yes, we are, but actually look, here we are sharing it. So good, we're making progress. Hopefully that's the most important thing. The worry absolutely is that it's detrimental to career progression, and it shouldn't be, because look at the, without sounding funny, powerhouses we've got on here, and it's they've owned their anxiety, and now look at these wonderful people and many others as well. So if you know, I say this quite controversially probably, but if you find that, you know, you have an employer that is not accepting or understanding of anxiety, and then, you know, that maybe it's time for looking for something else. But on that note, before I get in loads of trouble, I'm going to move on to Rob. Rob, talk to me. Tell me.
I don't mind getting in trouble for that.
Huh?
I said I don't mind getting in trouble for that one.
It's true though, right? It is true, isn't
Massively. It? I think employees need to understand that in stressful environments, high stress ends up leading into anxiety. So they have to recognise that if you want high performance teams and you want your company earning good money and your teams to thrive in that, one of the things you need to sort out is your mental health and wellbeing environments for them, and having that in place, because you can't expect them to be, I call it zone, like a bit like when I do some running zones. So you have 1 to 5 zones. So zone 5 is like it's like a sprinting 100 meters. So if your team are running at 100 meters for a marathon, it's never going to happen. They'll collapse. They'll end up in hospital. So I always say within environments, a bit like you were just saying then, if your teams are under high pressure environments, you have to make sure that they have the ability to come down to a zone 2. To be able to step outside, to have that breathing space, to reset themselves, to rethink about what they've gone. Sometimes to even just digest what that phone call was. Otherwise, they're never going to digest maybe what that experience was with for them, and then it just gets locked into the head. They go home, they try and get to bed, and all they're doing is just thinking about everything under the sun. So, processing-wise, for me, a bit like. Amy, you were saying about like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, like 5 things to touch, like feel, all that sort of side to it is a great one. For me, you can't really do necessarily on evaluation, but for me, something which is like quite primal in us is actually laying our stomachs flat on the ground. So you can't really go and actually do that, but actually laying flat, if you're feeling that way, and actually having as much of your mass earthed effectively, helps control those levels as well, because you feel a lot more grounded. And that's where obviously you tend to find those struggles with like the fight or flight and that fear. That's what you need to, basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to pull yourself back into a grounded state. So your feet feel like they're on the ground and you're back into some sort of balance. Another breathing technique I like to use is what you call the box breathing, which is a four in, hold for 4, out for 4, and hold for 4. And that actually could work as well on evaluation. If you're in a property and you can't go outside, and there's not that opportunity, and it's pissing down the rain, and you can't go, I'm just going to go and collect my thoughts whilst out there. Look at a window frame and do the 4-4-4 exercise around that as a box, effectively, to try and help you. So if you're in a room, you can still do that breathing exercise. If you're walking around the room, if you're just focusing on a window, for example, as something to try and help you ground yourself as well on that. There's a thing called what you call a swish pattern, which is what you can actually start to do in getting your brain to think differently about, a bit like Amy was experiencing around when you go on holiday. Obviously, something you can do in the preparation for big moments that you're starting to feel anxious about is naturally, from an anxiety point, you start to visualize everything that's like the worst case scenario it's going to happen or how it's going to plan out. And that's your brain playing the tricks with you. And that's where you start to get into those states of feeling anxious towards it. So the swish pattern works in a way that you visualize the alternative universe of what could happen alternatively, like what do I want to happen, and you start to have that visualization. And what you have to effectively do is you close your eyes and you have to almost get into a feeling of a state where you have the crisis identity image, and you have that, and in the bottom corner you have your version of the ultimate self. And the whole process is every time you think about it, you've just got to try and push that other one up in place. And it's what they do. They go whoosh, whoosh. And you basically, it's a pattern. You start to ultimately, through closing your eyes and visualizing it, you eventually get to the point where you're trying to replace the more happier image with the more tougher image, or the crisis image, effectively. And that you can do, like, it could take 30, 40 attempts of trying to spin that around and almost pulling that crisis one into the smaller box at the bottom. And then eventually it almost gets replaced within that. So it's quite an interesting one and a concept you can do. It takes some time to get into the mindset of doing it. There's loads of stuff you can do on YouTube around it, but again, that's like almost like a preventative one. For me, I tend to try and work on I've worked on a lot of preventative measures before I have to then go into when it actually physically happens trigger-wise. I'll be honest with you, probably the last time I had a panic attack was like maybe two years ago, effectively. And that's where like that's massive compared to what was before. I mean, it was pretty much on a weekly basis.
I'm really pleased to hear that that's working for you, Rob. And I think there's some amazing things for people to take away there. I think the box breathing is actually one that I use in the moment. Like that's like just it's that, take a minute, like just but it does regulate everything. But I think that both of you have touched on this idea of getting inside your mind and the visualizing some different ways that things will be. Sometimes people talk a little bit about, focus on what you can control sometimes as well, because we do naturally as humans, and I am terrible for this, focus on the things that we can't control, totally beyond our control. And I've spent a lot of time recently being much more in the here and now, and it has meant that, because we spend a lot of time worrying about the future, don't we? Things that haven't actually happened yet.
The mind loves to play tricks.
Yeah, and it's powerful. So actually, if you're like genuinely right in the now, you realize that it's just your actions are what matters, and the rest will either happen or won't, but try not, and some of what you're describing, Rob, is that sort of saying the brain goes to that catastrophic place quite quickly, naturally, because what Sam said about that fight and flight. But actually, if we can sort of get the brain to think, actually, put that over there,
Yeah.
And we'll focus on the here and now, the what we can control, the actual reality that's happening. That can really change the perspective and from a proactive and in the moment, I suspect.
I think like Sarah, intercept there, like a couple of things which I've learnt myself is I actually now name certain things that I do. So I say my ADHD brain's coming out because I've got ADHD. So I say my ADHD brain's coming out, and I've categorized it away. So it's not me, it's my ADHD brain. And then I know how to tame that. So I look at it and go, right, why is my ADHD brain kicking up? I've been on my phone too much. I'm getting too much intensely in there, or I don't know, I have a drink and I had another drink, and then it's like that part to it. And then so you almost have to recognize the characteristics of it. And the same can be done with your anxiety, characterizing your anxiety, put it into a box, not just saying it's a full part of me. If you can say like, my anxiety is starting to kick in now, like you're almost saying like it's a character of yourself. And you can do that as also within your brain. I've got two parts of my brain called Reggie and Rocky. And Reggie's like the critic, the one that comes out, you can't do this and all this sort of stuff. And then I have Rocky, who basically comes out and knocks Reggie out. And Rocky's the person who is the champion, but the champion who comes out and reminds you everything you've ever achieved when Reggie said you couldn't do it, and will remind you to do that, to say you can take that step, because this is nothing. Remember when like 2 years ago, Reggie was saying that this was going to happen and it didn't happen because Rocky came out and helped you. The same thing you can do with that. And it might sound a bit crazy. And like on my running, I do this. So I actually shout sometimes like a Rocky part to it. And it sounds a bit weird when I'm running out in the middle of the countryside and I've got normal people walking their dogs and there's me shouting at myself. But it tames my inner self, and it makes me realize that what my thoughts are not who I am. They're just my brain playing tricks with me.
Yeah, so true. I reached for this book off my bookshelf. It's similar sort of thing, I think, that you're talking about. If you haven't read this is The Chimp Paradox. It's a classic. Many people have read it, but it's well worth getting it on Audible or ordering it or what have you, or borrowing it, because there's a lot of them floating around the industry. So if you want one, I'll post you this out. We start a book club. But ultimately, I had to name my chimp, the emotional part of my brain, and her name is Stacey. She's a right character, I can assure you. But it's true, it's about understanding that as well. Sometimes in a bit more detail can really help you. Natalie, thank you for your question. We're definitely going to talk about how others can support people suffering with anxiety. That's a really big point I think we need to cover. And Sophie, I am absolutely chuffed to bits, and I know you run your own very brilliant business. But I'm really pleased to hear that you have a real openness now after your experience in your career previously. You have an openness for your team, which is brilliant, because you're leading the way in helping people. And to touch on what Rob said, we want our teams to be high performing. This is what we want. It's why we're estate agents. We want to be successful. Let's be honest. But we have to put people in the right place to be able to do that. We can't just expect it to happen. And we also have to recognise how high pressure this environment is that we work in. Thank you so much, Rob and Amy and Sam. I mean, I'm hoping that you say that your employer's all right. So fingers crossed on that one. But apart from that, what do you think generally around the idea of what techniques are you aware of, have you used maybe, or have you learnt about, because I know you've done a lot of training on the topic?
So for me, the only thing I think I could add is the support network side. Actually talking about it puts confidence in someone and trust that you're feeling these things and they can support you, they can check in on you, they can maybe have the possibility to make sure that you're not in any uncomfortable situations that could cause any sort of anxiety or nervousness, whether that be your boss, team leader, your partner, friends, even getting a mentor, someone who is a complete stranger that can help. So yeah, for me, the only thing I could add is that support network and how valuable and positive it can be.
I totally agree. Your colleagues and are so important. I was very lucky in agency, especially at the second company I worked at, that I had a colleague that recognized it in me. She could see it like almost building up in me, and she'd be like, outside. So she would almost see the signs of it before I did, and she would just be like, get outside. Like and that's amazing. But I've got a colleague at the moment who has been through the wars a little bit over the last couple of years, and is, you know, having regular panic attacks. We work remotely, a lot of us suppliers do, so we have an agreement and we message each other when we're having panic attacks. So we're sort of, he's making sure and accepting, he's going through like an acceptance phase at the moment of accepting panic attacks and wanting to accept them. So he's messaging me every time he has a panic, and if I'm in a meeting, I'm like, what's happening? Get outside, like go for a walk, and just make sure you build that relationship up with your colleagues, that, and your employees, if you're a business owner, that people feel safe. You've got to create a safe environment, and it's so important. Did I feel safe as an estate agent? No, not 100% at all. I definitely wouldn't have shared it with my bosses. No way. I hid it from them. But I was very lucky that I had colleagues that did support me, so it was like okay. But I think as a manager of people, it's something that I talk about quite openly myself and my struggles with it, so that it makes my team feel comfortable with it as well. And I think that's really, really important. And even if you don't suffer with it as a team leader or a manager, I think, yeah, do some reading, do some research, talk to your team, look out for signs. So if somebody is maybe, you know, going to the toilet a little bit more, and you're thinking, why are they going to, or why are they walking outside all the time? People struggling, sort of, Rob mentioned ADHD, but fiddlers, like if you're constantly sort of fiddling, tapping on desks, nervous energy, you know, legs shaking, people kind of constantly doing things like that, and kind of busy, that nervous energy, look out for signs like that, because they're kind of signs that maybe somebody is struggling. So yeah, I think the support around, and we're very lucky, Agents Together has helped me no end. My mentor is incredible, and he got me through an incredibly tough year last year, and I owe him a lot. So I think if you don't feel comfortable talking to anyone within your company, please reach out to Agents Together, because I've been in that situation, and honestly, I hit my mental low last year, my all-time mental low, and without Agents Together, I remember the phone call to Sam. I was crying my eyes out. I was in bits. I rang Sam and was like, help me, help. Within an hour, Sam had lined up a mentor for me, and I was on the phone to that mentor that day.
I mean, I brim with pride, but also so happy for you, to be honest, Amy, that's the experience you've had, and huge kudos to Sam for making that happen. This definitely wasn't a promotion for Agents Together mentorship, but it is actually a really valid point that, you know, we're going to talk about this next. We hope that you, if you're watching this live or recorded, that you are in an environment where you feel like you have people you can talk to. But even if you are, or even if you're not, then, you know, that is the whole reason that Agents Together was set up, was to make sure that somebody always had somebody to talk to. You never felt alone in this industry, because it sometimes can be lonely. We recognize that. So yeah, so that's a really great point, and thank you for sharing that, Amy. I want to touch on probably quite a difficult one now, actually, as we sort of start to think to wrap up, but not quite yet, and that is any recommendations for people who, apart from obviously, you know, seek a mentor or whatever, but how can we talk about anxiety without, you know, feeling like we're going to be negatively impacted by our career, like Sophie's experienced, as she mentioned in the chat. Sam, I'm going to start with you this time. Is there anything that you would say to somebody about, you know, having an opportunity to try and talk about it if it is causing a problem?
To start conversations off about it, I would suggest putting it into the one-to-ones that you have with your teams, because that's meant to be a safe space. You can make the right people aware that if you are struggling, but also just do some research about the people that have shared their experiences within the industry, because those people that have shared their experiences, like the people on this call today, they will be more than happy to talk to you. You know, the reason why they've shared their experiences is to support you. So don't feel closed off. Just do some research and talk to people.
And we're happy to connect everybody up, if that's required.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, even if it's not a mentorship, even if you just want to get an opinion or sort of advice or something to make you feel that you're not the odd one out, just talk to them.
It's interesting you should say that, because that's a really key part, isn't it? Is that, first of all, I think it starts with knowing that you're not alone in this, and then it's about how can I then get some sage and sound advice. Hopefully this webinar goes a long way to providing some really good ideas and ways you can manage anxiety. Rob, Amy, either both of you, have you got any thoughts just to add to what Sam said around, you know, how can you broach the subject with somebody who may be a bit like me years ago, not different story now, but maybe doesn't quite understand anxiety?
I think a lot of people who probably, it's not necessarily I don't understand anxiety, is actually they're probably wearing their own masks to try and hide their inner insecurities about it. I mean, I was one of those people. I didn't believe in mental health despite having suicidal thoughts in 2016. Like, I was one of those people in the office, and it was only until I had a tragic event that I then was like, wow, this is an opener for me, and that's where things sort of changed. But going back to what Sam was saying, I'm a big advocate of the wheel of life in one-to-ones. So the wheel of life is a common thing out there. It measures like family, health, fitness, money. You can download it, and bringing that into your team's one-to-ones and getting them to rate themselves, whether they're from a 1 to 10 scale, you can start to then have those conversations about them, why they're probably feeling that way. That it might be, they might have anxiety over financial difficulty. They might have anxiety over family issues. It might be work environments. It might be health environments for them. So that allows you to have those conversations and open those conversations, and they feel like it. And also it helps you it gives them something for them to track and try and work towards evening out, rather than it just being a one-off conversation. And that's a really supportive one. And the second one for me is, I keep saying about it, just remove okay from the office environments. Stop asking if you're okay, like ban it, ban the word fine and ban the word okay in your office, and ask someone to come back and challenge them on it. So if they say okay, go, no, I need another word, or I need a number from you out of 1 to 10. A lot of my clients
ignore number 7, ban number 7.
Yeah, everyone goes 7.
No sevens, no sevens.
But like, it is so true. Like, I've got clients I spoke to today when they say, how are you? And I always respond back to that. And it does have a different conversation, because a fine could be a 1 and fine could be a 9, depending on that. But if you turn around and said, I'm a 1 out of 10 today, it's a whole different conversation than I'm a 9 out of 10. So
I love that, Rob. And quite a few of my clients, not agents together, when I'm doing my other stuff, wearing my other hats, have actually now put that into the appraisal / one-to-one process. So it's kind of like giving your, you know, how are you feeling in a 1 to 10, rather than, because you're right, personally, I'm the worst at this, absolutely the worst. I almost think it's like subconscious now. Someone says, how are you? Yeah, I'm good, thanks.
But it goes back to that whole thing of like tradition. Like, the biggest stigma I say out there at the moment is we've always been told to have a stiff upper lip, and that's how society is. But how is that fucking working for us? is it working? Sorry for my language. Sorry for my language. But is it actually working for us? Like, do the stats say that that is the route, that is the perfect route? The suicide rates, the people that are struggling, like the 1 in 5, the 1 in 4, 1 in 6, all these stats that come out every year, like that is not working. So remove what we think is right and start having open conversations, because the better that we align to our authentic self, remove the mask, the better your team are going to run, because the better they're going to feel that they're coming to their work and they are actually acting in line with their inner true self.
Yeah. If I could ban performance-related one-to-ones, I would. I think for me, one-to-ones are nothing to do with KPIs, performance, sales stats. I can give a damn. I have a motto in life that if I have happy staff equals happy customers. And it just resonates with me, because if my colleagues and my team are okay mentally, they're going to be performing.
Yeah.
All right, they might have an off month. Big deal, everybody does. But one-to-one should be all about mental health, their personal, are they struggling with anything? You know, there's so many issues that people face outside of work, but we spend more time at work than we do outside of work. So you have to make sure that their personal life is okay more than their work life, because if they're personally happy, then they're going to be happy at work. Like, their performance will be related to how happy they are. For me, that's just my thoughts. And I just don't think one-to-ones, I remember, you know, one-to-ones that were just completely figure-based. I think I get asked once how I was, you know, working 60 odd hours a week and all the rest of it. It's irrelevant.
I think with time, like, the reward of being in employment is you get paid, but ultimately the crux comes down to it's time. You're giving your time. So if someone is giving their time, they're never, ever going to get back. So it's down to you. You are required as a leader to make sure that the time they give to you, you give them the best time possible within their life they can have, especially if they're working 40, 50, 60 hours a week. Like, and that is like one of the biggest stats I've seen out there is, for every £1 invested into mental wellbeing of your team, you get £5 back.
Yeah.
Even if you don't want to financially part to it, there's your financial reason to maybe invest into it a bit more.
And if there's one book I'd recommend people read that suffer with anxiety, but also for people who manage teams, would be Notes on a Nervous Planet by a guy called Matt Haig, who's written some awesome books. But that one for me, I very randomly sometimes have panic attacks in supermarkets. I thought that was really weird. I thought I was just the most oddest person. There's a whole chapter on panic attacks in supermarkets in this book. And when I read it, I was like, oh my God. It was like, I'm not weird. I'm not strange. This happens. So yeah, Notes on a Nervous Planet is a great book about anxiety. Totally recommend.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, so we've talked about a lot of things. I can't believe it's, 50 minutes in. Doesn't time fly when you've got so much to talk about? I have picked up so much from this. I literally, I've got pages and pages of notes. There is obviously a big thing in terms of, like, we've talked about talking about it. Is there anything, if you spot somebody, if you spot a colleague, a friend, a partner, anybody, seemingly struggling, what can you do? Because that's a big question, and I think we've got to address that, because we know when it's happening to us, and we've talked about how we can help ourselves. How can we help others? What can we do? And I'm just going to open that up as a final point to anyone who wants to talk about that.
Okay, first. Oh no, go on, Rob. You are the expert.
No, Sam.
Well, mine was just a simple one. If you do notice anyone, don't approach them in a public place, whether it's outside or in the office. Take them to one side, because if they're already feeling pretty crappy or anxious about something, you're going to make them feel more awkward spotlighting them in a public place.
Yeah.
So take them aside, do it privately, get it in a comfortable, safe area, and then approach.
Okay. Yeah, really good advice. Thank you, Sam. Rob?
A couple of parts. Like, one is effectively what you class effectively in professional terms, contracting. So you almost need to make that person aware of, when we have a discussion or when we're opening up having a discussion, we're going to protect it. I'm not going to go anywhere else. But obviously, if there is cause for any major concern, then are you happy for me to share it or speak to someone further about it? Just so they feel like that's the bit that people are always scared about. And I've had that. I've had examples where I've been in employment before. I've expressed my issues and my problems that are going through, and then it's been told to someone else, and then they start openly have a conversation with me in the office with like 20 other people, and I'm thinking like, whoa, I'm not going to talk to you ever again. So that would automatically shut it down. And the fundamental part is listening, but without telling them what to do, because you can't tell people what to do. So you have to listen, and that is like, the silence game is the key part to it, and we don't like silence. I'm a worse one for all of that part to it, but open up those questions, but allowing someone to actually physically process what they're feeling and what they're going through without you interrupting them, and also telling them what to do. Because if you tell them to do something and then they go off and do it and it doesn't work for them, they're going to feel like that's advice. So it's going back to the open questions.
I think and asking things like how can I support you, or I think once they've opened up to you, like, how can I help, how can I support you, what would you like from me? You know, there's such little adjustments you can make in the workplace. But I also think doing one-to-ones, I used to hate one-to-ones in the back office. Like, you've always got like a back office in an estate agents, haven't you? No, go out for a walk, grab a coffee, take away coffee, go out for a walk with them, walk around the local park. Or I used to go to do one-to-ones. She did a couple in the pub. Just take them to the pub if it was in the afternoon, coffee shops. Just get them out of the working environment, because people will open up to you and you'll have a much more honest and real conversation out of an office. So if it's just walking around, if the sun's out, coffee shop.
Even on that part, Amy, it's a great point, because if you automatically sit table opposite each other, it's like a table game of tennis. It's conflict. Like, it's me against you. Walking side by side with someone or sitting with a chair side by side with someone, they're going to automatically feel like you're a part of their tribe or their team. It has a different conversation because you're not intensely looking at each other. You could be from sideways. So if someone is thinking about certain things or doesn't want to make that eye contact with you, it allows them to just safely process what they're going to tell you.
Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely brilliant. Amazing. I mean, I have learned so much today, and I hope that we have gone some way to raising awareness that anxiety exists. It doesn't have to be a negative. It can definitely, you know, if managed correctly, if you recognize it, if you can accept it, then actually it can be, as Amy said, you know, turned into a positive in some way.
Superpower, Spider-Man.
But hopefully, more than anything, if you do suffer with anxiety, which statistically speaking you're very likely to, and or if you have a team and you're worried about how that's impacting them, hopefully what you've learned today is, and I know I have, is some how to recognize it, and then some techniques for how to deal with it and cope with it and overcome it and create a more positive experience from it. But also how we can all support each other. And I'll just leave. We've got 3 comments that I've got to share with you. So Callum Hartley says he does this is relating to Reggie and Rocky, and he's saying he does the same. He has a belligerent teenager that yaps in his ear that triggers his anxiety. Yeah. Spencer says, and this is really powerful, asking how are you a second time. Really, how are you? This response is often very different from the first response and far closer to the truth. I think that's incredibly powerful. And you need to be, so that it also gives more meaning to that how are you, rather than it just being a flippant sort of comment. So thank you for that, Spencer. And Sophie, and I'm going to finish on this. Thank you for working to remove the stigma and sharing all this with everyone. You guys are amazing. And I want to reiterate that to Rob, Amy, and Sam, who obviously I work with Sam every day, but still, I am so grateful to all of you for joining us today. This will be out on YouTube, all of our social media channels. It will go to our whole email database, be hosted on our website, and I'll put it in as many as the estate agency Facebook groups as I can. And if you want it in your office separately and you want us to WeTransfer it, we'll do that as well. You just need to reach out to Sam or I, and we'll make that happen. We want to share this far and wide. There's, you know, this is for the benefit of everybody, but huge thank you to our guests today for taking time out of very busy schedules to join us, and hopefully we're all helping each other. So thank you very much, and see you all very soon on the next one.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, everyone.